Hi guys, welcome to my baking channel. My name is Susie, and on this channel I show you how easy baking is if you understand the basics and the science behind baking. I'm really excited today because I'm making buns for the very first time, and not just any type of buns, I'm making potato buns. So let's go ahead and get started. For this recipe, we need 1 pound of russet potatoes, so make sure you get russet potatoes and not red potatoes, or you can gold potatoes, make sure you get russet potatoes. So if you don't have a scale, 1 pound of potatoes is about 3 medium potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and rinse those out, peel, and cut them into 1-inch cubes to help speed up the cooking time. Now I'm going to boil them for about 8 to 10 minutes or until they're cooked through. To test if your potatoes are done cooking, if you try to put a fork in it, it should just go through. After we're done cooking our potatoes, we're going to set aside 5 tablespoons of the potato water, which is going to come in handy later. We're going to drain the remaining water from the potatoes, and we're going to put the potatoes back on the stove on very low heat until all of the remaining moisture has escaped. I'm going to transfer the potatoes into another dish or bowl, and I'm going to mash them until they're nice and soft and creamy. After mashing the potatoes, we're going to measure 1 packed cup of potatoes, and we're going to set aside. And you can use the remaining potatoes to make some mashed potatoes or whatever you like. I'm going to transfer the potatoes into another bowl. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of butter that have been cut into little pieces. I'm going to mix that all through. So if you're wondering why on earth would anybody put potatoes in buns, or why would we make potatoes out of buns? Why would we or why would we make buns out of potatoes? I mean, first, who doesn't love potatoes? You know, like mashed potatoes are so fluffy and so filling. But the key reason why we want to make our buns out of potatoes is because potatoes contain potassium, and potassium, actually, I just learned this today, potassium helps to increase the rate at which bread rises. Typically during the first rise, you need about 1 hour to 1.5 hours, but thanks to the potatoes we're adding to our recipe, we're only going to need 30 to 40 minutes for the first rise. For this recipe, you can only use bread flour, and that's because bread flour has a high protein content. So when bread rises, we need the gluten, thanks to the protein in the flour, to help create almost like a wall to help contain the air as the bread grows. And like I mentioned before, we're using potatoes in this recipe, so that's going to help speed up how fast the bread is rising. So we need bread flour to build a strong wall around the dough to help contain the air and the gases as the bread rises. So as usual, I'm using my scale to measure my flour because using a scale is the most accurate way to measure flour. But if you don't have a scale, I'm going to link a video to show you how you could measure flour using measuring cups. So a tip here, you want to keep your yeast separated from your salt because the salt will kill the yeast. Now that I'm ready to bake, I'm going to go ahead and whisk all my ingredients together. I'm going to go ahead and add the potatoes. And using clean hands, I'm going to go ahead and mix up everything together. I'm going to add an egg, and the potato water we set aside. I'm going to mix those all together. And I'm going to finish kneading using my stand mixer. I noticed that when I started kneading the dough, it was kind of dry and it took a little bit of time for the ingredients to get together. But after kneading, it should be nice and soft. So I'm going to go ahead and just knead for a couple more seconds. And the dough isn't very soft like I'm used to, but it should be very smooth. And I'm going to spray the container to prevent the dough from sticking onto it. I'm going to place my dough in the container. I'm going to cover it with plastic wrap, and we're going to let it sit in room temperature for about 30 to 40 minutes or until it's doubled in size. I had to let my dough sit for a little bit over an hour because my house is basically an ice box. It's almost at 67 degrees. If your house is a little bit colder or if it's during the winter, it's going to take a lot longer for you to rise your dough. So if you're in a rush, you can go ahead and place it in a warm place like an oven without turning it on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and punch my dough down, and then I'm going to transfer it to my countertop. So now you want to go ahead and divide up your dough into 9 pieces so you could shape it into an 8x8 square and then cut it up into 9 pieces. But that never works for me, so I'm going to go ahead and use my scale because I have one. So what I usually do is I tear out the container, the bowl I have or whatever I'm using, and then place my dough and then divide the total weight by 9 or however many pieces I want. After dividing the dough into 9 pieces, we're going to go ahead and cover them up to prevent them from drying out. And I'm going to form one at a time into balls. Form into a ball, I'm going to go ahead and flatten out the dough a little bit, and I'm going to use my middle fingers to push the dough inwards while on one hand I'm cupping the dough. So just doing that helps to form or create a really nice taut ball. I'm just going to keep doing that until I'm satisfied with how tight or taut my ball is. So you want a nice smooth surface when you're done creating your ball. After creating the ball, go ahead and roll it on the countertop to smooth out the bottom. So after that, go ahead and cover the dough with plastic wrap. You want to make sure all the sides are properly covered so you don't dry out any of the dough. We're going to let them sit for 15 minutes and then we're going to move on with the next step. For the next step, we're going to need 2 baking sheets lined with parchment paper. Then I'm going to lightly flour my surface, and then working with one piece of dough at a time, I'm going to flatten into a 3.5 circle, and you want to make sure you keep your remaining dough covered. So I'm going to gently press. If you see any bubbles, like any big bubbles, go ahead and pop them. I'm all done, and we're going to let the dough rest for about 30 to 40 minutes. And about 10 minutes before baking, we're going to preheat the oven to 425 degrees F. And we're also going to place the oven racks in the middle and the upper middle positions. Before we bake the buns, we're going to brush them with some egg wash. And the egg wash is 1 egg, a teaspoon of water, and a pinch of salt. And we're going to lightly beat those together. And using a pastry brush, I'm going to brush it on each dough. And if you want, go ahead and sprinkle some sesame seeds on the dough. And next, we're going to bake them for 15 to 18 minutes, and we're going to rotate or switch the pans halfway through baking. After you take the buns out of the oven, transfer them to a cooling rack and let them cool for about 5 minutes, and then they're ready to serve. I wish you guys could be here to see this. They look amazing. They're so light and fluffy, and they smell really good, and I cannot wait to have some burgers with these. They're so light and fluffy, smell really good. So it's time to taste the buns. That's really good. The only feedback I have is they're a little dry, so maybe bake them for a little less longer. But apart from that, they're really good. All right, I'm gonna go finish my dinner. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Wow.